Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
Come on, say.
We just came back from seeing Happy End, Michael Haneke's Happy End, at the Midlands Arts Cinema. Art Centre.
The Mac.
At the Mac. And the first thing to say is just how wonderful, the facilities are now. They have a 4K projector, and you can really tell that it's a 4K projector.
You can really, really tell.
Yeah.
I think I noticed it just the other day. I went to see Human Flow.
Uh-huh.
I went to see Human Flow the other day there, which you're going to see in a few days. And I noticed it then. I thought, wow, this is an incredibly clear, beautiful picture. They've splashed out.
It makes such a difference. I mean, I think it's the best screen in Birmingham now, outside of the IMAX at Cineworld, really. Yeah, kind of, you can see it's very luminous.
Yeah.
And it's also sharp, right? So you have the warmth of the light along with the ability to see things clearly, So it just makes everything really different, because there are times at Cineworld where everything just feels like a bit grey and damp. And you realize it's actually not the film's fault. It's just there's not enough light hitting the screen,
Yeah, you can't feel the way that. Yeah, it's just you feel that at the Mac, the film is being presented to its best advantage.
Yes.
You couldn't be watching it in a better presentation.
That's right.
Which is great.
Yeah.
That's a really thrilling sort of visual.
Yeah. So since we've been so critical of other instances where either the projection or the screen or the facilities haven't been up to par, we thought we'd take a moment to really praise the Midlands Arts Centre for, providing the audience with such a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Although the seats aren't that good.
Oh, right.
I'm just saying, if you could take...
You could have saved that for another time.
I'm just saying, if you want to take the seats out of Cineworld, and put them in the Mac, then it would be great.
Anyway.
And also they don't allow food in there, which is lovely.
What do you think of Happy End?
I really enjoyed it, which is an interesting thing to say about Haneke, because you sometimes feel these films really aren't designed for that, but this is quite clearly a black comedy.
Yes.
And there was quite a full cinema, and it got a lot of laughs out of them. I think people... I don't think it's so much people recognise parts of it in themselves, although I'm sure that's true, but it's just that it's got a quite sensitive sort of comic feel to it.
Yes.
Quite cute.
Quite black. I mean, I loved it. I kind of... I do think Haneke is one of those filmmakers that you have to see on a big screen, because there are moments in the narrative where, at least speaking for myself, if I were seeing it on my own, on a TV, I'd put the TV on pause, go wash some dishes, or call a friend, or... Right, like, it's a film that does make demands on you.
Oh, yeah.
That does all kinds of interesting things, but they're demanding. And there was a stretch in the film where I feel, oh my God, I've got to endure this, right? Like, you...
A lull.
Yeah. But then actually, there's a payoff later on at the end, because all the pieces fit together and it finally all makes sense. And that which had been a bit burdensome to kind of sit through, all of a sudden kind of becomes, fascinating, really. I love that about Haneke.
Before we go on, obviously, we should say spoilers are coming up.
Yeah, lots of spoilers about everything.
As usual. So where did you feel the lull was?
Well, it was almost kind of right at the beginning, about a third or a quarter of the way through, because, you're seeing all these things, and initially they don't quite make sense, right?
Well, he's doling out information very slowly and carefully, like who the members of the family are and how they relate to each other.
Yes.
I was paying very close attention to that, but I ended up with no questions about that. I think the information does ultimately come out.
It does ultimately come out, but unlike other filmmakers, he doesn't necessarily give it to you when you want it. So for example, there's a scene where there's like all of these quite erotic and in some ways quite romantic, but really filthy email exchanges going on. I don't know who it was being sent to, right? It took me a while to gather who was like doing the sending, and actually, because it's a film about a family, you see a surname, but you actually don't know. I mean, I thought it was the young man rather than,
the the father.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you see a name Thomas, but then it's only until much later that someone calls someone Thomas. And then you know.
Exactly.
There's a lot of that. Or like, for instance, the relationship between the mother and the son. So the son is this sort of foreman on a building site, and a wall falls down, and then he's having an argument at the site with an investigator, and the mother's there. I'm thinking, what's the mother doing here? Like, did she just come along to help him out? And then there's a bit of dialogue where she says, we don't want this to happen again. It's like, and something that makes it clear that she's part of the company.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's doled out subtly.
Yes. So, I mean, I think there were two things that really stood out for me about this film. One was that, how the narrative doles out information when it sees fit rather than when you want it. And it creates all kinds of tensions and excitement out of doing it that way.
But I think it's done very subtly and naturally.
Yes, it's good. I'm praising it.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is how it deals with, this is also part of doling out information, but, there is this thing about in cinema, and particularly in certain types of cinema, that if you hear, if somebody's talking, you will hear what they say. And you might even hear it too loudly. Whereas in Haneke's films, you're often at a distance, right? Kind of, you actually don't hear. Information is rationed to you, right? So kind of, people could be talking about all kinds of things. All you see is that they're on the phone far away, or that they're talking to somebody across the street. But what's important is not what they're saying, really, but what you're seeing, right? And you can imagine what they're saying. Or, when the little girl finds her father on the phone, you don't know what he said. You haven't heard what he said. And actually, it later turns out that she has heard. But for a while, you get the sense she's heard something, but how much and what?
Yeah, but it's the performance. Like, so when the girl sees the dad has taken a phone call saying, "This is work. I need to take this," and then when she spots him a few seconds later, it's clearly an intimate phone call, and you can tell from his performance. He's smiling. There's a look. It's not a work phone call.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter that you can't hear. You know that he's on the phone with someone intimate.
Yes. I also like the way that the whole world in this film is mediated, right? So, you watch a building site collapse, and you're conscious that you're seeing it through a surveillance camera. The film opens with, something being filmed on an iPhone, and when at that moment you don't know who's doing the filming. Emails occupy, kind of an important part of the narrative. Things like that, I thought.
Yeah, and there's a YouTube, sort of YouTube aesthetic, but basically a YouTuber.
Yes.
YouTube vlogger rather, has done there's stuff about he's found some old videos or photos of himself, and then he's applying loads of crazy video effects to them in a way that it's like, so it jars with the nature of the rest of the shooting.
It does, because what's interesting about this film is that all of that social media and so on is used to hide more than to reveal, right? So kind of the young girl films her mother's last night. Yeah. But, she doesn't reveal her actions, in relation to that last night. Kind of the blogger, the vlogger with a V that we see, she's seeing it online but doesn't necessarily have any relationship to him. Whereas, she clearly has a relationship with her parents, but she thinks she might not have the kind of relationship that she wants with her father. Yeah, so the way that social media is used, it's part of the landscape, right? And it's part of a link that people have with each other, but it's not necessarily a transparent link.
It's funny, actually, I kind of took it the other way. I took it completely the opposite. To me, it suggests that there are basically three kind of digital sort of worlds that the film occasionally dips into. There's the sharing the video on the iPhone, with comments that she, it's the girl ultimately we find her doing it, and she's writing these little comments that pop up and kind of narrate it as it's being shown. There's the bit where she watches the YouTube video of the kid talking about his photos from when he was younger, and the emails and Facebook messages with the guy having the affair. And those are all about being more intimate than people are in real life.
That's interesting.
You know, the conversations that they have over social media are filthy, and they're all like they're talking about, I want to piss on you, and I want your ass, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
They're incredibly filthy and intimate, and there's these declarations of love that just come thick and fast. The kid watching the YouTube video, the entire section, it's like a vignette really, because it doesn't fit with anything else.
Who is he?
Sure, but the point is that is about this guy showing off to YouTube. Look what I was when I was a kid. This was the only dance move I could do at the time. Oh, it's so embarrassing. But it's about revealing himself, and it's quite self-effacing. Yes. I mean, at first I didn't realise it was him. I guess I must have missed a line of dialogue. I thought he was attacking someone, and then I realised when he says, "This was the only dance move I could do," I thought, "I know this is him when he was a little kid," and he's been quite insulting to himself.
Yes.
And then, and right at the start, all the iPhone videos, the girl sharing the kind of things that she's up to in life. You're right that she's not completely honest, but it's still about sharing, and she's speaking and sharing with people far more than she's in real life, because when she's spoken to by a father in real life, she hides really. And it's only when she speaks to her grandfather and they start sharing stories about their kind of relationships with death. That comes out, and that's very late on in the film.
Yes. I don't know. Well, that's interesting. I mean, you may be right. Actually, it would be interesting to see again in that respect, because certainly there are things that are being revealed, and particularly revealed to us, through mediated forms, through the television, through the emails. Actually, I would include in this also the karaoke. Yeah, you know, that the son is expressing something through that hip hop music that obviously he has trouble talking to his mother about. So you know, it's kind of like there is a kind of expression that is going on through mediated forms that is partial but nonetheless heartfelt. That's right, actually, I think. And then people's relations in real life, so to speak, are much more formally bounded, right? And hierarchized and ritualized. So, you know, because, I mean, what we haven't said until now is that the whole film revolves around the bourgeois family, right? Like, you know, a family who owns a construction company, right? You know, and very well-to-do, you know, and they have servants, right? So, kind of, you know, it's about this group of people that we're talking about, with these very ritualized ways of being and relationships and hierarchies, and kind of one of the things that's very interesting in the film is the way that kind of race seeps in, in all kinds of interesting ways. It's there on the edges of this world, and kind of depicted as a threat that has to be managed or assuaged, right? And in which the politeness of forms is something that oppresses these people. So, you know, there's an instance in which the owner's dog has bit this child, right? Which is like a frightening thing. And all of a sudden, all the good manners come in and a box of chocolates and so on. But that's all to make a threat not happen, or to assuage a threat, or to put a potential threat to the side, or to deflate it, extinguish it.
The child is the child of one of their servants, one of the cooks, and she's Moroccan.
Or Moroccan, yeah.
She's Moroccan, as you know from slightly earlier, when the son of the family has drunkenly announced that this is our Moroccan slave.
Yes,
and you must try her rice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's really beautifully done, and also I like. So it begins very darkly, because actually I think we should just say it begins with a daughter basically poisoning her mother as a kind of a game, really. It's a child's game, you know, but it's more than that. So, you know, her mother is on all of these medications, and the daughter's experimented on her hamster, you know, and then the next person that she experiments with is her mother, right? And as a result, her mother is hospitalized and ends up dying. So basically, the daughter has killed her mother. Now, you know, this is kind of made a bit more complex than that, because you're actually not sure whether she intended to or whether she really wanted to kill her. But what you do know is that she needs attention, and she wants to go live with her father. And that she wants that attention. So the film is already bounded by this notion that this very innocent looking, very beautiful, clear blue eyes, 13-year-old child is potentially a deadly killer. So actually, by starting off with that, it makes every subsequent appearance of the child have a really interesting tension, right? So there's a moment where she goes to live with her parents, and there's a baby, and she just holds up the baby, and all of a sudden, a 13-year-old child holding up the baby, instead of being a sweet, oh, how cute thing, becomes one full of tension and danger. Right?
What could she do?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, it's like one of those Hitchcockian MacGuffins, because actually nothing happens, but it could happen, right? So all of a sudden, it's charged with that tension, which I thought was great.
Yeah. Well, it's the Hitchcock thing of if you show two people having a conversation and then the seat blows up, there's no tension. But if you tell them 5 minutes earlier, there's a bomb under there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
even if the bomb isn't going to go off.
So the bomb, in this film, or the MacGuffin in this film, is that, everybody is capable of things that are not advertised by their appearance. That, there's something underneath the looks and the formality. So the bourgeois home and the bourgeois mentality is, also, a killer one. I don't know how else. Yeah.
I wanted to think about race because, as you said, it's kind of on the fringes, and I think there's something kind of meta going on with it, which is that the one thing that I knew about the film really before I went into it was that it was about bourgeois life in sort of Calais, ignoring the refugee crisis.
Yes.
And that led me to believe that it would be much more explicit about that, and much more, really that would be the focus more than it is. And I think that it's weird because it meant the fact that I had heard the film described that way, and I think that's basically the only way people are really describing the film, it prepared me to look for that. And so the fact that actually I really didn't see very much of it, and it comes in, it's very brief. There's a couple of the servants that you see, who are clearly of minority ethnic, although you don't know if they're refugees or not, but they're from minority ethnic backgrounds. And then, right, basically towards the end of the film, the son brings in a lot of refugees. You've also seen them briefly earlier with the grandfather. He brings in a lot of refugees to disrupt a very white, very bourgeois birthday party.
Yes.
Or engagement party.
Engagement party.
But this is in the context of like a 2-hour film. It happens very, very little. And I think it's that if I hadn't been prepared for that, I wouldn't have seen it as much of a topic as it is. But I think that because the ground had been prepared for me to look for that, the fact that I wasn't noticing it was almost kind of like saying, you should notice how much this isn't in the film. Like you are kind of the film is so about the bourgeois family, that because they exclude minorities and refugees from their life, even though they're on the doorstep, the film does as well.
Well, except that but like in Calais, I mean, because I hadn't read anything at all on the film, and I to me it was very noticeable, because you're right, it occupies a very minor role in the narrative, but it's always on the edges and it's always disruptive, and I think it's much more than the two scenes you mentioned, which are very important. But so, for example, there's the scene of Jean-Louis Trintignant walking in the wheelchair, it's down the street, and then there's these 4 black guys that appear, and he's trying to negotiate something with them, which you never hear what it is.
Well, that's the one of the scene I mentioned with the black guys.
Okay, all right,
Sorry,
okay. So I think it is, the combination of the servants being Moroccan, which in France, North African has a particular resonance, right? Colonial resonances, and then, kind of these people on the street, and then the music being hip hop, and it's just there on the edges, right? You're right. I think the film is about keeping it out of sight and, and having it come in at tangents and explosive moments and so on. But I think it is there.
Yeah, I think you're right, but all I guess I'm saying is that had the film not been described to me in that way, I would have had a different experience of that aspect of it. I think that because it was described as a film about ignoring refugees,
Yes.
It's almost like saying you should look for what's not in this film.
I don't even think I would describe the film as being about, keeping refugees at bay now.
Well, I kind of agree, but I think that's interesting then that the film's being described that way. Maybe people are searching for a description of it. I don't know.
Yes.
But that is the primary way, really the only way that I've seen it described.
Well, it's interesting. The way that I would describe it, it is about a bourgeois family, with and actually with very well-rounded characters, because even when they're murderers, they're not dislikable, and you kind of, most of the time understand kind of where their actions are coming from.
They're human and they're confused and they're understandable. And
they're grappling. They're trying to. They're struggling with things, and you see them keeping secrets from each other in a way that you would expect people in your own life to keep secrets. I mean, if a guy's having an adulterous affair, he's not going to be yelling it to everyone, right? Like, it is going to be a secret, right? So. I mean, I didn't despise this family. In fact, I felt I kind of understood them, right? Like, the Isabelle Huppert character is so interesting because, on the one hand, you get the sense that she knows her son is a bit of a loser, or certainly, like, incapable, and unreasonable, and that he's drinking too much and so on. On the other hand, she clearly loves him and wants to help him. So she's aware of what his faults are and trying to manage them, while at the same time you get the sense that she's part of the cause of this problem, that she's too controlling, and
as well.
So actually you get a very kind of complex depiction of people's motives and ideas and ways of being and their desires and so on, but that seems to me to be kind of the subject of the film, really. I think the thing about it being mediated is also kind of very strong, and I think the thing about Calais is there, I think it is part of what you're seeing, but I wouldn't say it's the subject. I wouldn't say it's the main theme,
That's all I'm saying, really. I think that brings in an interesting kind of tension. It's you're basically being told in this film, look for something that is barely even there and notice how much it's not there.
I'm not.
That's kind of the way I felt like. Because if I hadn't been primed to look for that, I would have noticed it a lot less. Ultimately.
Yes.
And I would have noticed its absence a lot less.
I mean, the film is so interesting because it does things that as a consumer of Cineplex movies, you just don't expect them to do. It's not the normal syntax of cinema, right? It's kind of, so for example, there are moments here where, there's a cut and all of a sudden, like, time has passed, right? Or, and you're not too clear on why. The young girl committing her attempted suicide, like, I didn't see it coming.
Which bit was that?
The young girl appears in bed, right? And all of a sudden she's in a hospital, right? And, you don't know where she got, or they go visit the mother, and then the shot is held a really long time, and you're looking to see why, but actually you can't really tell. And then, of course, it turns out that she's dead. But you find out that she's dead, like, 6 months later. So actually, an ordinary cut could mean the next shot, or it could mean 6 months later, or it could mean, this huge event has now happened. It kind of...
It's the omission that's important.
And also a cut could lead you into a whole other universe in Haneke's film, right? Like, so I thought it was interesting because, before we began to see the film, we were talking about that advertisement, and you said it's like, what's his name?
Oh no, it was an advert for a car, which is this goat. There's a black goat or sheep, and it's got horns, and it's Jimi Hendrix is playing, and I made some joke about it being done by Terrence Malick, this advert being done by Terrence Malick, and then you said, was it really? And I said, do you think that Terrence Malick could get to the point that quickly?
Exactly, right? So that he would need like 45 minutes of context or setup. Well, actually, Haneke is the opposite. It's like he moved, like a cut can just move you on to something like completely different.
I was noticing this. I was thinking about this as I was watching it. Like he is so efficient, and when he wants to move, I think he kind of has a reputation for being slow. Maybe that's also like an art film reputation thing that just comes with the territory. But when he wants to move something along, he can, and he does, and he just does what's right. And what it means is that when something takes its time, it feels, there's value in that, and every shot is held for the right amount of time, and it's not quite like Cachet, where in Cachet the act of looking is important in itself, insofar as you're being invited to search the frame.
Yeah.
There's a feeling of that in this, but it's more about appreciating the composition. Really, it's not about searching for clues in things.
Yes. Though sometimes there is that, because sometimes in this film as well, so you could have like what I would call, a normal time. Yeah, so the shot lasts this long and then there's a cut. And then there's times where he'll halt the shot for an inordinately long, amount of time. And you're searching to find out, why is this shot being held for so long? Right?
Absolutely.
Though I think kind of, unlike in Cachet, you do actually then understand why the shot has been held.
Yeah. It's less ambiguous.
Yeah. The scene where the son goes into this council estate and then he gets beaten up. And it's all done in, quite a long shot, right? So, the figures are almost like deep in the background, like in front of this council estate, right? And you're seeing the whole council estate, and then you hear them having a conversation, and then he gets beaten up. And you have no sense what's being said, right? And then actually, once you realize what is being said, or what could have been said, then you understand the rationale. What could you say when some people have been killed by your company?
Yeah.
Right? So he probably went there to apologize, got the shit beaten out of him. But actually, what do you need to hear? That's so much more powerful to just, kind of words can't express, either the apology or the pain that someone else is feeling.
Yeah.
Right? And actually, it is, because that's the opposite of the mother, who would have found the right words and the right box of chocolates, right? Yeah. and who would have diffused, who wouldn't even have gone there, probably.
But then also, in retrospect, it recontextualizes that entire shot, insofar as you say, you're seeing this. You see the guy walk up to this counterfeit. So basically, he's walking from close to the camera into the distance, and the camera pans across and reframes on this counter state, which takes up most of the frame. And so it's in retrospect when you realise who he was and what the conversation, roughly speaking, was being. You're being invited to look at the differences between the council estate and the estate where this guy lives, with all this money. Well, actually, he's got a very posh flat.
Yes.
That his mum was paying for, I guess.
But there's a hierarchy of that, because you see how even the people in the council estate are so much better off than the African migrants, or even the Moroccan servants, right? So actually, you get a real sense of that. Like you get that at the scene at the lawyer, the solicitors as well, when they pay off the families of the men who've been killed, right? And say, we're offering you 35,000 euros, take it or leave it. And you see the people, and you think, well, they're like real kind of just working class people, right? And for whom 35,000 euros is an enormous amount of money, but for whom they've also lost a family member, and how could you put a price on it? But you see that, the way that they're dressed and their attitude, you see they're working people. And yet there's these enormous gradations of differences in power and status, right? From this bourgeois family that you see, through these working class people, which normally would be considered like the poorest people who live in a council estate and so on. But actually, there's also the Moroccan servants. And then there are people who are actually just off the boat and completely homeless, I thought the film... It's interesting because it's not about that, but it's there. Like as soon as you begin talking about it, you just can't escape it, right? It's kind of almost one of those. I would say a structural absence, except it's not an absence. It peeks through the edges, But as you said earlier, by not being the center, it actually does become an issue, or the issue, or a central issue. It's funny. It seeps in.
It's funny thinking about the way it's shot. The first time I kind of noticed the way it was shot, I suppose. The first time I noticed, I really paid attention to kind of the economy of it, just that there's a subtle kind of uniqueness to it, despite the fact that actually some of it looks like quote unquote any other film. Was the bit where the dad is in the car with his daughter, and there are two shots in it which are from the dashboard, and one of the shots is looking left at the daughter, and the other shot is looking right at the dad, and they just intercut back and forth, and it's like a pretty normal, kind of uncontroversial way of shooting a scene like that. And the girl starts crying, and the dad's going, "Oh no, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm sorry," and he pulls the car over, and I realised that any other director would have had an external shot of the car being pulled over, so you can see clearly that the car has moved off the road.
Yes.
But he doesn't do that.
Yes.
Everything is still taking place inside the car, and the camera is still on either the daughter or the dad, and the car's being pulled over. You hear the sound effects, and then the car stops, and you can see. But like the focus is entirely on their faces, and it's the focus is always on the people.
Yes.
There's nothing like everything else informs the characters, and when there's no reason to show anything else, you just show the people, and that's all he does. And I don't know, there's something. It's such a human film.
Yes. Actually, it's interesting you say that, because I just kind of again want to specify. I think it is such a human film. On the other hand, it begins with something being filmed on a phone, and it ends with something being filmed on a phone, right? So the aspect of representation, mediation, all of those things are there. And then actually Jean-Luc Trintignant?
Jean-Louis Trintignant?
Jean-Louis Trintignant has this speech when he's talking to his daughter, and Jean-Luc Trintignant wants somebody to kill him, or he wants somebody to give him something to commit suicide. He doesn't know, but probably suspects that his granddaughter is actually a killer. But they have this conversation about this, because she's tried to commit suicide, and Jean-Luc Trintignant wants to commit suicide. So he has this conversation about violence, which is one of Haneke's themes, and he says something like, kind of violence isn't like you see on television, right? Like it is something that hurts.
He talks about seeing a bird of prey kill another bird.
That's right.
And it's not the same on TV.
Yeah, how you're shaking, when you see that. And I thought that was interesting, because what you see in the film is also other kinds of violence, actually. The violence that people do to each other, which are sometimes like quite, something quite banal could have like, a real repercussion, right? And something that seems to have a real repercussion in a way could also then be quite banal. So, for example, for me, the sun coming in with the refugees at the end, it's something that ruffles like the whole event, destroys the mood of
It's a huge room full of white people.
That's right.
And then these kind of 6 deep, dark black faces are introduced into it. And they're not comfortable being there either.
No,
it's the
they've
sun.
clearly been paid and they're forced to be there.
But it's the sun's stunt.
Yes.
To cause this conflict.
Yes. So that seems like something, but in a way you feel it's nothing, because, Isabelle Huppert with her beautiful manners comes in, puts everybody at ease, brings a table so that the black men could enjoy the party.
With that said, she does break her son's finger. It explodes into physical violence. She breaks her son's finger.
That's true.
And
that's very funny.
And that shuts him up. It is very funny.
Yeah.
But it shuts him up. And then she says, okay, we're going to sort this out, have a table. And she invites him in.
Yes.
And amicably kind of resolves it.
Yes.
But it explodes into, it's a kind of, it's like a social violence, I guess, that the son is perpetrating. And then it's amplified.
Yes.
Well, not amplified, but it's actually concentrated, I suppose. It's concentrated in a single act of physical violence.
Yes. I would say 2 things. So first, I just want to comment on the performances, right? Because I think Jean-Luc Trintignant is so fantastic. And I think if you have grown up seeing him, which maybe you haven't, but, I have. I mean, maybe not in an intimate way. I wouldn't say that I know all of his films, but I've seen him in movies from the 60s, through Il Conformista by Bertolucci to Haneke's own L'Amour of a few years ago. And A, he's extraordinarily good. and B, there's just something about his star persona, or the fact that you've seen him age on film, right? That aside from whatever his own performance gives, is very touching.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think the other actors, Isabelle Huppert is, of course, I've never seen her be, anything else than excellent, really. And Matthew Kassovitz has a really interesting presence. He's the father, right, who's most famous probably for being the director of La Haine, right? I think he was also in Amélie. And he's got kind of an odd, slightly discordant look, almost handsome. I thought that was all kind of, I thought that was worth a comment. And the other thing that I thought was worth a comment was...
Almost handsome. Damning with fake praise.
Well, but...
I know what you mean.
And
He's got a sort of unique look.
Yeah.
I mean, Toby Jones is also in it, and I would describe him as having an independent look.
An independent look. Anyway, the other thing that kind of slightly bothers me, or what I would see as a weakness, though, it could just be me, is the sun. I kind of, when he was doing the karaoke hip-hop number, I thought some aspects were interesting, but, it went on so long, and I thought it was very actory. You could see the actor was making a meal out of, all the acrobatics and everything. I thought it was like a discordant note in the film.
Possibly. I think I enjoyed the fact that he actually turned out to be quite good at the acrobatics. I was amazed. I thought it would be he was kind of drunk. The scene is about kind of expressing something physically that he clearly can't do vocally, or and also expressing something among strangers that he can't do with family.
Yes.
And again, there's a kind of violence in it, but it's physical expression. So I kind of assumed that he would get drunker and drunker and more discombobulated and start falling apart. But actually, when he started rolling around and doing cartwheels, I thought, oh my God, he did a proper cartwheel. Yeah. He did a handstand.
Yes.
He's capable.
Yes.
I don't know what to make of that, really. It was fun to see, that's for sure. There's life in that scene. I really liked it.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, kind of. So I suppose, the film is a critique, and, you do get the sense that the son is a nihilist, and... so there's this thing about the mother is a real workaholic, and she's always, her mind is always on business and on things to do, and there is his questioning of, well, why do you have to work, why do you so, but on the other hand, he clearly cares enough to be brought low by the whole thing, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I think the film is one of those films that'll probably get even richer the more you see it. So it could be that my reservations about that aspect of the film at the moment, there's an answer to that I haven't yet found in the film, right? But for the moment, that is something that I wasn't quite clear or convinced by.
I think it's very clear that on subsequent viewings, it'll, as you say, it'll become rich. It's one of those that I think like all Haneke, to be honest, especially Caché, which is my favourite film of his, that the more you watch it, the more you notice, the more you're taught to notice. I mean, as we said before, the second time you watch a film is always different to the first, because you know what's going to happen. You start to understand things to look for, and Haneke, I think, takes advantage of that. His films are always more revealing with the context.
Yes. I think also, one of the things that I thought at the beginning is, that there are films that you go to be entertained, right? That's probably the wrong word, because in a way everything can be entertaining.
I know what you mean.
There are films that you want to act on you, and kind of there are films that you want to be engaged by, but that might not actually result in pleasure. That might be hard viewing or demand a kind of work from you. And I think all of Haneke's films are the latter. Kind of, they make demands on you. But the thing is that I find all of his films that make demands on you also reward those demands. So actually the pleasure that you get from them is, I think, at least as great, or sometimes even higher, than one of those films that kind of just work on your consciousness immediately. You know, it's kind of it's not just the sugar dose. You know.
Well, there's something quite interesting about that, which was that, in a way, I kind of went into this film expecting a hard ride.
Yes.
And so the fact that it was
easy.
I mean, that's kind of, it sounds insulting almost. So it sounds like I haven't kind of appreciated it as much as I might. Maybe I haven't, but like
that.
but it is an easy watch.
Yes.
The characters are fully rounded and you believe in them, and it's very easy to kind of take them in. It's not kind of overly challenging you to your face, I suppose. And so I kind of went in expecting a difficult ride, and the fact that it was so easy to watch was incredibly pleasant.
You know what surprised me was how funny it was.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, absolutely. I had no idea.
I mean, the humor is very black, but it's very funny.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
it's right there. Like, you don't have to dig for it.
Yeah.
You know, it's making jokes. And
Yeah.
things.
So, and that was very unexpected for me, you know, so kind of that was a pleasant surprise.
And the audience got it too.
And the audience got it as
Yeah,
well.
it was, like I say, it was a pretty full crowd and it got good laughs.
Yeah.
There was one in particular, the guy sat right behind me. There's a bit where Toby Jones, there's so many details. The scenes are rich. Like, I mean, when you're talking about not having to search the frame for clues and stuff, but you still can, and they are full of things. And there was one point in particular where Toby Jones is having dinner just in front of the TV, and he's a lawyer somewhere, or a manager of something like that. And just in the frame, just in the foreground, out of focus, is a bottle of Campo Viejo wine.
Yes.
And I noticed that, and clearly the bloke behind me did as well, because he laughed.
Yes.
Because I noticed that, because that is such a symbol of, I've been to Tesco and got a bottle of wine.
Yes.
And it just, like, that one, as long as you recognise the bottle,
Yes.
which I think probably a lot of people will, because it's
Yes.
that big yellow label I think you
Yes.
recognise, you get that, you get his character almost immediately.
Yes, you do.
And I thought that was wonderful. And that is, okay, so I don't know actually. I mean, you can't tell where that came from. Maybe Toby Jones suggested it. Maybe Haneke knows it. Maybe it's a big kind of popular bottle of wine elsewhere in Europe.
Yes.
But it tells you about his character, no matter where that came from, and that's great.
Yes. I kind of, you know, I also wondered where the chocolates were from, but I couldn't detect it. But they look very fancy. Anyway, on that note, you know, this is a film.
I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it as well, and we highly recommend it if you get a chance to see it.
I'm so glad that you said it was an easy watch as well, because I kind of almost felt ashamed to say that it was an easy watch, because you feel like it's not supposed to be.
Yes.
But actually, it's lovely that it is, and it doesn't dampen the experience in any way.
No. In fact, you know, there were things that you know, well, anyway, I love it, you know, even though, as I said at the beginning, there was this moment in kind of a third of the way in or something where I just kind of was still a bit unsure of how everything was falling into place. And I did think, oh my God, this is a film that I might have to endure. But actually it turned out not to be the case at all.
I must say, I didn't feel that at all. I think the film made me feel confident.
Right.
That it would...
You're so smart, Michael Glass.
No, not at all. I just felt, you know, not confident, but put it this way, I didn't at all feel worried that the film was not going to explain itself, which is interesting because I think sometimes with Haneke and maybe art cinema in general, you feel like this whole thing is going to just add up to ambiguity.
Yes.
Which is not to say it doesn't in some respects. You know, the film is left on a kind of a cliffhanger, and there are aspects that are unresolved or unexplained.
Yes.
But ultimately, like, you know the characters, you understand their relationships, you kind of get all these people being brought together and the way they interact and the way they bounce off each other, and so even though some things might end up being unresolved, you don't feel unfulfilled in a way that, you know, you don't come out of it thinking, well, it didn't explain that.
Yes.
You know, or it was being cool and calculating about this.
Yeah, no, it's kind of it was a very enjoyable and rewarding experience. So
ironic title though, that's his thing.
Yes.
I mean, whenever Haneke does a film with an ironic title, you know it's going to have some cool violence in it.
Anyway, let's end it here.
Good film. I really enjoyed it.
It was a very good film.